So, good morning. This is Sunday Assembly Manchester. My name is Louise. I am your host for today. And we have a very special theme. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Sunday Assembly, we are a secular community that celebrates life. We believe that we have this life. We want to live better, help often, and wonder more. There are assemblies that meet all across the world, and I can tell you that there's LA tonight, 7 o'clock our time. So if you want to go along to LA, we can let you know the details. Make sure you give us a like on Facebook, and we are very grateful to our patrons who support us on Patreon. And if you want to do that, that would be wonderful. Other than that, it is free to attend. We are entirely volunteers, so it would be really cool if you could give us a bit of patronage to help us keep going. So thank you so much for that. We've got a special theme for you today, which is depicted by this little man behind me, T-Rex dressed as Elvis. Our theme is Born Again. And when you watch Jurassic Park, which I'm sure you have, you probably watched it and thought, oh, that's very convincing. That probably could happen. Maybe we would end up having dinosaurs in the future. Well, it's not as sci-fi as you might think, because today we're going to find out from our speaker that it's very possible, and not only possible to have dinosaurs, but it might even be possible to have Elvis, which is why I ain't nothing but a T-Rex. Growling all the time. I don't know what T-Rexes say. So that's my background for today. So we are going to find out about resurrection. I mean, we talk very positively here at Sunday Assembly about being alive, about celebrating being alive. But of course, there's a bit of a secret. Oh, we're going to die. Oh no, I know. I'm sorry if I'm breaking this to you for the first time. And we, as humans, are experts at getting rid of that bit of going, oh no, we'll live forever. I'm sure there'll be. I tell my husband all the time, oh no, illness and death. And he goes, nah, we'll have solved it in a couple of years. He's adamant that we're going to be living forever. So this idea about keeping on a legacy and finding a way to resurrect people is really quite amazing, and something that I think is in our mind. I believe Walt Disney's cryogenically frozen somewhere, perhaps just his head, waiting for the moment where he gets the opportunity to come back. So that is our theme for today. Is there any chance that T-Rexes, Elvis, and maybe us will be able to appear back in the future? I'd like to introduce to you our first person who's going to be speaking today. So just to let you know what's going to happen, we've got a poet, we've got a speaker, and I'm going to introduce our poet for today, who apparently has been screamed about in a park. He was highly recommended. This doesn't make any sense, but John, we got to know about you because someone was very, very, very sort of, I want to say into you. That's not the right word, is it? A big fan, basically. So we're very delighted to have you here. Ladies and gentlemen, show a very warm welcome to John McCulloch, our poet.
Hi there. I'm going to read to you 3 poems from my most recent book, which was called Reckless Paper Birds. I've had quite a strange year. This book was shortlisted for the Costa, and it won something called the Hawthornden Prize. And it's been very weird having success in the year of a pandemic when you can't really shout about it. And yeah, but I'm grateful for having had the year I've had, I think. So the book explores the vulnerability, especially of the body. And this first poem looks really at the relationship between soul and body. So I wanted to read it today. Soulcraft. It's true, there is a light at the center of my body. If I could, I would lift aside a curtain of this flesh and demonstrate. But for now, it is my private neon. It is closest to the air at certain moments, like when buttercups repair a morning's jagged edge. Other times, a flock of days descends, and my soul flickers, goes to ground. Without light, I'm all membrane. Each part becomes a gate. I pour across each margin, and nothing has enough hands to catch me. My teeth knocking so fast, I daren't hold any piece of myself near in case I start a banquet. I'm only eased by accident. On the drenched path, I pick up snails and transport them to safer earth, then feel a stirring. I watch as rain streams from locked back elms, my face teeming with water, and hello, stranger. My soul glides to my surface, like it too belongs there, like a bright fish rising to feed. This next poem, thank you. This next poem was a commission for the BBC that I wrote a couple of years back for National Poetry Day, and the theme was change. And I worked with a radio station, and yeah, I wanted to explore mental health, which is a bit of a theme in the book. The zigzag path. The day connives, and you think you cannot live here, in your body, alone and rushing forward all the time, like a silty river. All you wanted was to find a home beside the souls of white roses and hurt no one. But the light keeps shifting. An invisible broom keeps flicking you out from cover. You roll up at each destination with a different face, as wrong as the beech tree in Preston Park hung with trainers, a museum of tongues. The day connives, but this dirt is proof of trying. The chalk path you never longed for zigzags through cowslips no one asked to throng. In the park, a robin has built its nest inside a Reebok, the shoe's throat packed with moss, and a crooked whisper of grass that says, I can, I can, I can. I'm going to finish off my little set today with a love poem, which was inspired by a yellow teapot. Big fan of teapots. And yeah. Spout. Some months, all my thoughts are one colour. I hit a yellow mood and the world pours out its yolks. Tall stacks of National Geographic in Oxfam. Cranes that point uncertain fingers at the sky, while maple leaves swoop into me and cling, their veins like roads heading everywhere in fallen saffron cities. Then the teapot you saw on eBay had to have. It was like unpacking October and standing it on our table. Its yellow logic, strict yet plump, offering an outsized handle. A colour that might foster never-ending cups. We filled it with boiling water, our new sun, and that first time, the copper rings around its centre made it tick, 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 as if letting us know it could wipe us out if it wanted to, but we'd been spared, that we could live beside it, though should be grateful for everything of its kind which travelled toward us. All the yellow days. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Breakfast Paper Birds.
Buy the book. John McCulloch. Thank you so much. Thank you, John. Tell us more about the book. Don't be shy. You did it very quickly then. Hold the book.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is my book. It's called Breakfast Paper Birds, published by Penned in the Margins. Yeah, it was shortlisted for the last Costa and won a prize this year called the Hawthornden Prize for Literature. And it's all about the body, really, the vulnerability of the body. And yeah, a little bit about mental health. And yeah, I hope you might enjoy it.
You love that. Thank you very much, John McCulloch. Go absolutely. Oh, Matthew's saying that he can definitely confirm that it's amazing. So thank you so much. And say goodbye now. Thank you very much to John, who is our poet today. Brilliant stuff. Now, I am looking, maybe, I don't know, a little bit more glamorous today than when you saw me last week, because I had my hair done for the first time in about 6 months. Whenever I book an appointment to have my hair done, we always go into lockdown. So I'm like almost a jinx on having a lockdown. So I managed to go to the hairdressers, and I was having I don't know, maybe a 3-hour conversation with my hairdresser about aging. And it was all about, how do we hide that? What do we show of ourselves? And she was like, oh, there's a little bit of grey there, Louise. Would you like to sort of show that? And I was like, oh, no, thank you. Well, let's keep that hidden. We'll keep that as a surprise. I'm trying to hold on to my youth for as long as I can before it goes. And I just found it really weird that we're there having this conversation about keeping who we are, our aging bodies, a secret for as long as possible, because we would hate to feel too old or to be discredited. And I don't know whether this is true of men, but I definitely think women in particular are under a rather large amount of pressure to sort of be young. And I'm an incredibly open and honest person, but even I'm getting to the point where I'm like, maybe I don't tell people my age anymore. And I met a guy recently who said, hey, Louise, remember from our era? And I was like, era? What era are you talking about? I'm young. I am 15 years old. I am not in your era. Stop putting me. So I always think that, there you go. Babs has said that she loves being grey and aging is amazing. Maybe I should take a leaf out of your book, Babs, but I do think there's a lot of pressure on maybe pretending we're younger than we are. So Matthew's always looking forward to getting old as well. All right, it's just me then that's under this sort of pressure. So I can definitely understand maybe a little bit of fear of getting towards getting older and then potentially dying at the end of it. And by potential, I mean definitely happening. But we're definitely in denial, or maybe it's just me. It's everyone, isn't it? Let me introduce to you our speaker for today. Her name is Helen, and she is a science and comedy writer, which is amazing. She's written lots of different books for adults and for children, and she's going to talk about one book in particular, which I'm sure she can explain to us what that is. It's Helen Pilcher. Go mad, go wild, and let's see if we can save ourselves from inevitable doom.
Hello, thank you very much for having me. Hello, Louise. What an amazing background you've got. I love the fact that you've done that. That's just fantastic. If there's an original, can you send it to me with your signature on? So yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. So you've got a whole assembly on the theme of bringing stuff back, which I love. The poetry was amazing. The song was brilliant. And the book that I'm here to talk about was one that came out a little while ago called Bring Back the King, and it's all about de-extinction. And I'll explain what de-extinction is in a minute, but I just thought I'd share with you, when the book came out, I did this big event that was kind of linked to it, and it was run by the Science magazine, New Scientist, and we wanted to gauge what people knew or thought about de-extinction. So we put a question out on Twitter and we asked people, if you could choose one animal or thing to bring back from history, what would you choose? And we got some really brilliant answers. So somebody came back and they said a pet velociraptor. And I thought that's absolutely brilliant, and I was intrigued. So I messaged them back and I said, why a pet velociraptor? And they came back to me and they said, I just fancy a pet with retractable claws. And I thought, okay, interesting. And I messaged him back and I said, have you thought about a cat? And he said, yeah, I'm just not a cat person. So there you go. And then somebody else, I've got a list of them here. Somebody else said, how about a half man, half woolly mammoth? And I thought, interesting. I think I dated one of those in my 20s. And I thought, right, great, no one's really taking this seriously. And then somebody tweeted me back, dodo. And I thought, brilliant, now we've got people taking it seriously. And then they followed it up with, and I quote, then I'd farm them and start a fast food chain, KFD Dodo Cottage. And then somebody tweeted me in that Twitter stream, somebody tweeted me with what I think has to be the best dodo joke you're ever going to hear. It was one word, and the word was Nandodos. So yeah. So de-extinction, people think about, lots of different things. De-extinction is the ability of scientists to bring extinct species back to life, and it's something that people are really exploring at the moment. And of course, it raises the question, you think about de-extinction, you think about dinosaurs. So I genuinely have been fairly dinosaur obsessed for most of my life. I used to go fossil hunting when I was a kid. I still do that now. On the top of my Christmas tree in the room next door, I've got a dinosaur. you know, if we're going to bring an animal back, the instant question is, can you bring back a dinosaur? Could Jurassic Park be real? Now, I know Louise was intimating that this is the case, and I wish it was, but just to sort of squash this right up at the beginning before our expectations get raised too high, basically, to de-extinct anything, first of all, you need a source of its DNA. So the DNA is like this recipe inside all of our cells that is the genetic instructions for making you or a dinosaur or whatever else. And the problem is dinosaurs died out too long ago, 65 million years ago. We can't get hold of their DNA anymore.
No!
So, she's unmuted and is now screaming into the abyss. I'm with you. So no dinosaur DNA, no dinosaurs. I'm really sorry, Louise. So, but right, it raises the question, what could you bring back? And you say you need something that has been dead for not too long, right? And also you need it to be a species for whom we have a good grasp of their biology. So that made me think, okay, what about humans? Okay, and I thought about extinct species of humans, but I actually am a bit of an Elvis fan. I thought, what about Elvis Presley? Could we de-extinct Elvis Presley? And this was kind of like this sort of like intrusive thought grew in my brain, and it became the book that I wrote, which is all about, can you, what can you bring back? Could you bring back Elvis Presley? That's why it's called Bring Back the King. And so I kind of went on this journey to explore whether or not this would be possible. And the first thing I came across was a website called Americans for Cloning Elvis. It's a genuine website. I'm pretty sure it's still out there. I haven't checked it recently, but it's been there for a long time. Genuine website with people who are obsessed about bringing back the king. And if you go on there, you can join a list of signatories of people who think this is a really good idea. And also, as I say, you need a source of DNA. So the website highlights a couple of potential sources of Elvis Presley's DNA. And I wanted to track these down for the book. So two of them, it turns out, are in a museum in America. So I phoned up the lady who owns the museum and I got her to tell me about them. And she described how she got the first potential source of Elvis DNA when she was on a tour of Gracelands way back in the late 70s, shortly after Elvis had died. And she was on this tour going through Gracelands, where Elvis, of course, used to live. And she was following this organised tour group. And then she got to the man cave, which was this room where Elvis famously entertained all of his sort of like blokey friends. And she said, when she got to the man cave, she had this urge to feel what the king must have felt. And she dropped to her knees and she ran her fingers through the green, luscious shag pile carpets. And as the tour group moved on, she was left behind and she felt her fingers snag on something in the carpet, and she thought it was like maybe a wayward sequin from one of his outfits. So she popped it in her pocket in this darkened room and she left. And then when she was outside, she took this thing out of her pocket and she looked at it, and it was a toenail. And she thinks she has one of Elvis Presley's toenails. Now, if this is one of Elvis Presley's toenails and teeth and tusks and claws and these body parts that are made from this substance called keratin, they're a really brilliant source of DNA. So if it was Elvis Presley's toenail, you could use that as a starting point to bring him back. However, right, the obvious thing here is, how do we know that that's Elvis Presley's toenail? She even calls it the Maybe Elvis toenail, which I think is a brilliant name for an indie rock band, but not a very good place to start a cloning experiment, if you like, because it could have come from some open-toed, sandaled-wearing American tourist. So I think we discount that, right, as source number one, but she has a second source. Now, the second source is much, much more promising. In a room in her museum, she has this like beautiful mahogany cigar case, and when you open it up, it has a layer of red velvet in it, and in the middle of this layer of red velvet there is a test tube, and the bottom of the tube, it's got a stopper in it, the bottom of the tube has got clear liquid in it, and in the clear liquid is this tiny little white pea-shaped thing, and that is a wart that was removed from the back of Elvis Presley's hand back in the 50s before he went into military service. And the surgeon who removed it, the medic, somehow had the foresight to preserve this. I mean, you know, amazing in a time before eBay that he would think, I'm going to hang on to this, but he did. And it comes with a certificate of authenticity. And so we're pretty certain that this wart actually was once part of Elvis. So could you use it to get his DNA? And the answer is yes, he could. However, there's a catch here, right? And the catch is viruses, warts are caused by viruses. So you not only get Elvis DNA, you also get viral genetic material. And we know viruses are bad at the moment. We know they're very, very bad, right? So not a good starting place. So I became really obsessed about this idea. And I discovered that if you go on eBay and you search celebrity hair, you can actually buy samples of hairs that come from famous dead celebrities. And I'm just going to read you a little passage from my book, if I may, that explains what happened when I bought a bit of Elvis Presley's hair on eBay. So here we go. Okay, when it finally arrived, I was more than a little disappointed. Sometime earlier, I had bought some of Elvis Presley's hair on eBay and had then had to endure weeks of overexcitement while I waited for it to turn up. I was expecting something as iconic as the king himself. The package, I told myself, would be made of gold lame and studded in rhinestones. It would arrive with great ceremony, serenaded on by its own backing band, willed on by the frenzied screams of female fans who would camp outside my house and faint when the parcel arrived. But when the postman finally delivered my precious cargo, it was without fanfare. He didn't even ring the bell. He just popped the plain brown envelope through the letterbox and walked away. I picked up the drab, un-Elvisy anticlimax and turned it over in my hands. Save for the Memphis postmark smudged across the top right-hand corner, there was little hint at the import's legendary contents. Perhaps things would be more promising on the inside. Brimming with nervous energy, all shook up even. Sorry about that. I carefully opened the envelope and teased out the contents, but the luxuriant quiff of my dreams was nowhere to be seen. Instead, I found myself staring at a certificate. You are now the proud owner of a genuine strand of Elvis Presley's hair, it said. But where was the hair? I scoured the shoddily photocopied piece of paper for a clue, and it was only then that I noticed a blob of dried glue at the bottom of the page. It was pea-sized and transparent, easy to miss, but inside it was a short strand of hair. I stared at it. Words actually failed me. Not only was the strand minuscule, smaller even than a single eyelash from my face, it was also, and I can't bring myself to say this, ginger. Elvis Presley, if the certificate was to be believed, was a strawberry blonde. As the penny dropped, I felt so lonesome I could cry. I had spent a small fortune and endured a longer wait than the King's fans have for his comeback tour, only to receive what appeared to be one of Ronald McDonald's nasal clippings. So I did the only thing I could think of. I sealed the certificate back up in its original envelope, found a thick black marker pen and wrote upon it, everybody, return to sender. Adding that the address was unknown. The irony, I was sure, would be lost on them, but it put a smile back on my face. Then bright and early the next morning, I sent my letter back. So, okay, I didn't have luck with my strand of Elvis Presley hair, but if you could get hold of a strand of Elvis Presley's hair, could you bring him back? Could you? So I genuinely phoned up one of the world's most famous geneticists, and I had this conversation with him, and it was absolutely brilliant. I said to him, can you de-extinct a dead pop star? And he was quite taken aback, and then he said genuinely, yes, because Simon Cowell has been cloning pop stars for decades. Genius, what a brilliant answer. And I said, but seriously, could you do it? And it turns out that there is lots of DNA inside hair, and you could get Elvis Presley's DNA from inside Elvis Presley's hair. And what you could do is you could compare that against the DNA of just a regular person, and you could look for the differences between the two. And then you could edit those genetic differences into a regular human cell, and scientists call this Preslification. You could edit them into a regular human cell and then use that cell for cloning, and you could, in theory, bring Elvis back. Now, I'm not saying it's a great idea, okay, but I'm saying it is technically possible. But how similar or different would Elvis be? And of course, right, I'm a mum of twins. If anyone out there knows any identical twins, you will know that identical twins grow up to be very, very different people. So this new Elvis, Elvis 2, would not be the same as the original. So it seems fairly pointless, as well as being slightly unethical and slightly immoral, but there's something else as well. Now, I did a bit of research. When Elvis Presley was born, there were obviously no Elvis impersonators. In 1977, the year that he died, there were 150. But in the year 2000, there were 85,000 Elvis impersonators. Now, if you plot that on a graph, what you see is that it shoots up like this. And if you follow the curve to its logical conclusion, what that shows us is that by the year 2043, 1 in 3 of us will be an Elvis impersonator. So we don't need to bring him back because we're all going to be wearing blue suede shoes and you know, singing Hound Dog. So we don't need to. Okay, so my 15 minutes is practically up. We can't bring back dinosaurs. We could bring back Elvis, but it's not a brilliant idea. Let me just finish by telling you, there are about a dozen projects around the world, genuine projects that are out there looking to de-extinct, to bring back certain species that have disappeared. These include attempts to bring back the woolly mammoth, to bring back the dodo, to bring back a bird called the passenger pigeon, which was once the most numerous bird in North America, if not the entire world. And also my particular favourite project is one to bring back the gastric brooding frog, which was a little frog that lived in Australia that went extinct in the 80s. And its claim to fame was that it burped up fully formed froglets. So it didn't have tadpoles that swam around and turned into frogs externally. It would eat its fertilized eggs. They would develop inside the frog, and then when it was ready, it would literally burp up these little baby froglets. So I'm happy to tell you more about these projects that are happening out there. It also raises a whole host of really interesting questions as to, well, okay, we can do this. I believe it was Jeff Goldblum's character in Jurassic Park. You know, just because scientists could do this, are they stopping to think about whether they should? And the ethics behind this is really, really interesting. But I am a cautious optimist of de-extinction, and I think there are lots of potential reasons why we should be exploring this technology. And I'm going to leave it there for that and hand back to the brilliant Louise and take some questions.
Little lady. I'm feeling kind of different all of a sudden. I think okay, that is a bad impression, which I'm going to stop right now for all our sakes. Ladies and gentlemen, Helen Pilcher doing an amazing job. But wait, it doesn't end here, because if you have a question for any of the things that Helen has brought up, then please put it in the chat box. I know some of you have already asked some questions. One of the questions that made me laugh so much was, has anyone found anything less gross of Elvis?
I think the answer is no. Is the answer. They are all fairly gross. I mean, but you know, they can be much more gross. I mean, I talked about buying a bit of Elvis's head hair from eBay, but there are other bits of bodily hair from celebrities that you can buy on the internet. So think about, you know, cleaning out your plug hole and hoovering your bathroom floor to make sure these things don't end up in the wrong hands, or on eBay even.
Can you imagine? There's probably people going around Justin Bieber's hotel room with a lint roller.
Yeah,
trying to sell bits of him. That's incredible. Please admit, I've just eaten my breakfast. Yeah, fair play. Tony's brought up a good point that Elvis fans love him warts and all.
Oh, Tony, I love you. Tony's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Here we go. Is there a non-plant equivalent to the Millennium Seed Bank, says Phil?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah.
Where are we keeping all these bits and pieces?
Well, the answer is yes. So scientists around the world have frozen cell banks. They call them frozen arks. So what they're doing at the moment is they are trying to collect cells from endangered animals, so that if species like, I don't know, the northern white rhino, for example, because there are just 2 of these, the northern white rhino left, when they go extinct, if the technology becomes available, we might be able to undo some of the damage that we've done. So people are trying to save cells, and if we can't save their cells, we are trying to save their DNA so that we at least have the genetic instruction book. So yeah, there's a handful of these frozen zoos, these frozen arks around the world.
Very interesting. I'm starting to think that I'm maybe been a bit harsh with my husband and his toenail clippings. I might need them in case I lose him. Bring him back.
Also, you know, there's the standard sympathetic magic uses. So
Thanks, Phil. What are some of the best reasons for the de-extinction projects that you were talking about?
Okay, so
where's the good things?
The good things. Okay, so for me, the biggest reason for considering this, and I should say as well, these genuine projects, we're not about to see a herd of woolly mammoths stampeding through
I was going to say they're not. Can we think about what we're bringing back? Because I think a woolly mammoth seems a bit big and scary to me.
Well, they're herbivores, you know, they'd be fabulous, and you could put them in Siberia, and there's an argument that they would. Okay, so one reason for bringing them back, the woolly mammoth, there's an argument that if you put these animals back into their original ecosystem, they'll be able to. It's quite a complicated argument, so I'll just cut to the chase. They could help to keep the Arctic frozen, so they might be a weapon against climate change. But the bigger reason, I think, to consider de-extinction is as a tool of conservation. So it's about preserving biodiversity, and you can use these tools on bringing back species that we've lost if you want, but I think more pressingly, the same tools that you could use to make a woolly mammoth, you can also use to help preserve the desperately endangered species that we've got today. And I think that's where it's really worth exploring, to use as a tool of conservation.
What do you think about bringing back animals that may change the ecosystem, or bring back a disease that we've got rid of or has gone away?
Yeah, I mean, they're really, really important questions, and the people who are doing these sorts of experiments are thinking about this. There are really strict regulatory protocols around this, and any animal that's brought back would initially be in captivity until we can be certain that all of those issues have been addressed. And you don't want to bring back something that is big and scary and will eat people, or that will trash an ecosystem. You know, we have a planet with many, many ecosystems that are struggling because of invasive species. So we've got to be incredibly careful. And some people say, well, there's no point bringing back a woolly mammoth because the ecosystem has changed too much. But, and there's a great but here, if you choose the animals carefully, there are these animals called keystone species, and a keystone species is any sort of animal that has a really big positive effect on the environment and creates the conditions for other species to thrive. So although, sticking with a woolly mammoth, Siberia today might look quite different to Siberia even 5,000 years ago, the argument is if you choose the right animal and you put the woolly mammoth back, it will create the conditions to restore that original ecosystem and create a habitat for many, many, many other species, raising overall biodiversity levels. So that's another way it can help conservation.
There's an interesting part about the argument about Elvis. I mean, people have already asked this question in the chat box, but you sort of covered it a little bit about, if we did bring back Elvis, would it really be Elvis? And would people be disappointed if Elvis turned out to not choose music, but in fact decide to be an accountant instead?
Well, I think there's a very real possibility that's the case. I mean, imagine this kid growing up with like the world watching him, waiting for him to pick up his first guitar. Like, you know, most teenagers today, they don't need that kind of pressure. If there's anything that's going to drive you in the opposite direction, it would be that level of expectation and pressure. And we know that it would basically be an identical twin, but born 70 years after the original. The world's different, the environment is different, the musical influences are different. And imagine, say, if in his, I don't know, in his teenage years, he had a particularly bad throat infection, which meant he wasn't able to sing well. You know, life might just pan out for him very, very differently. So
you could end up a member of NSYNC.
It could. Yeah, it could all go very differently indeed. So, you know, if you're looking to de-extinct or clone anything, you're never making an exact replica of the individual, because life's a bit more complicated than that. But it's a nice thought experiment, which is where I don't have a secret lab in my garden in Warwickshire where I am cloning Elvis. I liked the idea as a thought experiment.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm glad to know that you're not. And also, I think it's quite hilarious if we found his toenail. We didn't know for definite. We accidentally brought back one of the tour guides who happened to just be cutting the toenails in his rug. But even talking about his warts and his toenails, I think it's sort of it reminds us that he's human and he's become beyond that now. He's like this icon. So you're like, oh my goodness, he must have cut his toenails. And that's a little bit off-putting. We've got a lovely story here from Rob saying, my sister got married at the Little White Chapel in Las Vegas with an Elvis singer. He was great and he was from Brinnington.
Oh, I love that. Do you know what I wanted to do? Me and my husband, when we got married, we wanted to like get everybody to come along dressed as Elvis, and we would be the only two people at the service not dressed as Elvis. We thought that would be absolutely brilliant. We didn't get around to it in the end, but that was our idea. But I did walk down the aisle to Hunker Hunker Burning Love.
Amazing. Sean has brought up a good point. It seems a bit unfair if we don't die because it gives others a chance. Where would we have the space? Who's thinking of the room here? We're just inundated with Elvis and T-Rexes and woolly mammoths. Where will we fit everybody else?
Yeah, well, sadly, we can't put off death, basically. And as I say, if you cloned a person, you're not bringing back the original. You're just bringing somebody back with the same DNA who's going to be a different person. They won't have that person's memories. They won't be that person. So we haven't overcome this slight problem of death that you mentioned at the top of the show. That's still with us, I think, and is going to be. And I think there's probably a very reasonable reason for that. You know, we've got to regulate the population somehow. And when you've run out of Netflix, you know, what is there left to do in life?
You know, once you've lived your life, what is there left to do? Here was I, all hopeful. I thought we'd have a T-Rex as a pet. I thought I'd be able to live forever. Now you're telling me that there's no point. We've got this one life. Matthew says your Margaret's may vary. Oh, people are asking about your book. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. I love the way your book is behind you. So the book that you're referring to is Bring Back the King, and I believe you very beautifully positioned it on the bookshelf, which is something Sky News would be proud of, to be honest.
Yeah, I've got 2 books on my shelf behind me. I don't know which one I'm pointing at now because I can't see myself on the screen, but I've got Bring Back the King, which is the one I was talking about, which came out a couple of years ago. And then my new one, which came out this year, which is called Life Changing, which is all about how humans are altering life on Earth. So that's there too. That's the one with the moths on the cover.
Is it a good and a good and a bad way? Is there any good to this changing the Earth? Because we seem to be getting into a lot of trouble because obviously we have got man-made climate change and we have driven a lot of creatures close to extinction, if not to extinction. Have you found anything?
I mean, what the recent book found was that we are altering life on Earth on a ridiculous scale. So not just the things that we alter deliberately, like domestic animals or deliberate genetic modification, but because we have this global influence as a species, we are now influencing the evolution of all life on Earth, everything. And we're seeing, and this is amazing, when I was at school, you were told that evolution happens slowly across millennia and millions of years, but we're now seeing it happening across decades and across human lifespans. It's speeding up, and so some species are going extinct, others are evolving very rapidly, so they're changing, and it is alarming in the sense that in 10,000 years, which seems like a long time to us, but in the geological time frame it's nothing. Life on Earth will look very, very, very different. However, what I would say is that as a single species, although we've wrought great havoc on our planet, we've also got this amazing technology and this level of insight, and we can change life for the better in terms of, you know, looking at the planet and the biodiversity on the planet. We can influence it for the better if we as a global community want to do so and persuade the politicians to do so. So there is a positive message in there somewhere.
Oh good, thank goodness. I was starting to feel depressed. I just had a message from Sean who says, when I think I've seen people well into their hundreds, they seem well fed up.
They do look grumpy, don't they?
Then he's now said the most Mancunian thing I've ever heard said in written form. Time's time, cock. Fair point. Matthew's also added to say that the 90-year-old man who took the vaccine seemed pretty chipper. I think that was a lady, 90-year-old lady, but maybe there's a 90-year-old man as well. Captain Tom's pretty happy. Oh dear, thank you. So the discussion will rumble on. I think so. Was there anything in your Bring Back the King book that changed your mind, or did you find anything that was particularly surprising to you in your journey to uncover?
Yeah, the thing that so the book asked the question, if you could choose one animal to bring back, what would it be, right? And so I started at the beginning of time with T-Rex, if you like. That's as far back as I went. And I looked at like the king of the cavemen, Neanderthals. I looked at the king of the Ice Age, the woolly mammoth. I looked at the king of rock and roll, and I expected that the animal I would most want to be brought back would be one that has already gone, right? I know that sounds odd. Something that is classically extinct, but actually the one that I thought was most worthy of de-extinction was an animal that's still alive, and there's a good reason for that. So I mentioned the northern white rhino. There are only 2 left, so although technically it's not extinct, these 2 animals that exist in a safari park in Kenya are walking dead. They're ghosts, and the same techniques, as I said, that you could use to bring back the woolly mammoth can be and are being applied to species like the northern white rhino. And a lot of people say there's no point bringing it back, it's too expensive, it's too difficult. And I feel like, no, not on my watch. I want these animals around for my grandkids and my grandkids' grandkids. And just because it's difficult is not an argument not to bring them back. So the thing that I found most surprising in writing and researching the book was that the animal I most want to bring back from extinction isn't actually extinct yet. It's one that's still alive, and it's the northern white rhino. And that feeds into the whole idea of de-extinction being a really potent conservation tool if people will just be brave enough to use it.
So we may not be getting our big parks, but hopefully we can save the animals that are on the brink of being lost, which we desperately want to do. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Go wild for Helen Pilcher. And yes, thank you so much for that. We've had a few discussions coming in that are talking about cloning the Turin Shroud, looking at William Shakespeare. So I'm sure the arguments will continue. So afterwards, when we have our social, feel free to carry on the conversation. Thank you very much to Helen. Brilliant stuff. I am incredibly sad that we're not going to get Jurassic World and Jurassic Park, although it always seems to go wrong. So maybe it's a good idea we don't bring that in the dinosaurs. It doesn't end up having, they don't end up skipping around happy together at the end of these films. There's carnage, there's people go, oh, I'll just leave this gate open. Oh, I won't put the alarms on. And then next minute, they're everywhere. People are diving out of the way. I mean, a velociraptor as a pet, it's bad enough having a puppy, to be honest with you. Never mind having a velociraptor popping up out of the toilet seat. No, thank you. I will stick with a goldfish rather than having that. Will we ever get Elvis? Well, it seems like we won't get him in his T-Rex form. Maybe we'll get a lad called Elvis who lives in Bradford. I don't know. And it seems from what Helen was saying, we'll eventually all end up being an Elvis impersonator, or at least 1 in 3 people, which seems to be more than mental health problems, and that's quite prevalent. So that's our future, to become an Elvis impersonator. You, your friends, your family, your children will go on to be Elvis. That is the future for you. So thank you very much to our speakers for today. Thank you very much to Helen, and thank you very much to John. Please go wild. Thank you very much. Next week, Sunday Assembly, we'll have our Christmas assembly. You can stop the video, Adam. Thank you very much. It's